Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover, and we have a great show this evening where we're going to be talking about races actually outside of Fairfax County, out west. And then also tonight we have Amy Ashworth, who is candidate for Commonwealth's attorney in Prince William County. And we're going to talk a little bit about her race as well. Thank you, Amy, for being with us this evening.
And thank you, Lindsey, for having me.
Absolutely. Now tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for this position.
That's a really good question. Some days I ask myself that
I
same question. I have been a lawyer here for 23 years. I spent the first 10 years as a defense attorney and guardian ad litem for abused and neglected children. In 2005, I became a full-time prosecutor in Prince William County. After 3 years, I was assigned to the Special Victims Unit, where I did the worst cases that came into the office. Those involving child physical and sexual abuse, child homicide, and adult rape cases. And I loved my job very much. But in 2016, I was offered a partnership at a local law firm in Manassas, and it was kind of too good to be true. So I took that job, never intending to be running for office. But after I left, many people, detectives that I worked with, victims that I had helped through the justice system, even defense attorneys, called on me to run for this position. And we haven't had a change in leadership in Prince William County in 50 years. And so I decided to do it.
Well, thank you for deciding to run. That's such an important decision that you made, and thank you for doing that.
Absolutely.
Now tell us a little bit about the Commonwealth's attorney position. Does it cover all of Prince William County? Tell us a little bit about the area it covers and then also about the position itself.
So it is the top prosecutor job in the jurisdiction. It covers Prince William County, Manassas, Manassas Park, and there's 4 towns, Haymarket, Occoquan, Dumfries, and I always forget the last one.
That's okay. So all of the area of Prince
Yes.
William County is encompassed.
Yes.
Now tell us a little bit about what this position does as top prosecutor. What are your responsibilities?
You set the policy for the office. So you're going to use the tax dollars and the resources that you have and prosecute the cases that come before you that are brought by the police officers and investigated by the police officers. And so you set the policy as to what you're going to focus your efforts on. My thought is that we should be focusing on crimes that cause the most harm to our jurisdiction. So your violent crimes, your special victims crimes, special investigations, which are your human trafficking, drugs, and gangs. And then I also want to focus on juvenile offenders. I want to stop that school to prison pipeline and really make sure that we're treating youthful offenders fairly. And then I want to really focus on domestic violence, preventing domestic violence and successfully prosecuting it. Studies show us that if we don't get involved early as prosecutors, the success rate of the convictions goes down dramatically.
Absolutely. And that sounds like some of your top priorities in the area. Are there different priorities and topics that are most important to the constituents that you'll be serving?
Yes, so what I have heard out on the campaign trail over and over again.
I'm sure the many doors you've knocked, right?
And many doors that we've knocked. People are really concerned about the lack of diversity within the office and racial discrimination in the criminal justice system as a whole. And so I want to make sure that we have policies in place to prevent that. I want to do implicit bias training for everybody involved in our system so that we have a fair, just system for everyone.
Absolutely, which is so important, especially as we move forward. And when you're out on the campaign trail. What part of it do you like the most? Is it connecting with your future constituents? What part of it do you really like the most?
I have had a lot of fun knocking doors and talking to people, all the events that we have been to, and as you know, there's quite a few that you go to, and just meeting all the people and having them open up their stories, their homes, and sharing with me their concerns about the criminal justice system. Even as a prosecutor, when I worked there, I didn't quite understand the impact that we have on the community. And now being out on the campaign trail, I really see that.
That's great. And do you find when you're connecting with people, do they know a lot about this position that you're running for already? Or is that something you really have to talk to people about, is the importance of this position?
They really don't. Many times they get confused with the Attorney General, which I'm not running for.
Right.
That's for the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. And they often ask, why is it an elected position? And I try to explain that you're representing the people of Prince William County, Manassas and Manassas Park. And when you walk into the courtroom, you're there as the people's representative, the Commonwealth's attorney in cases that offend the common good or criminal cases. And so it's important that the people select a good, experienced attorney for that position.
And what do you think are the strengths that you will bring to this position?
I have tried many cases as a prosecutor, but I've also tried cases as a defense attorney. So I know what it's like to be defending somebody who did something usually on the worst day of their life. And so I bring a compassion to that office, having been on both sides of the fence. And I've also been a guardian ad litem, as I said, for abused and neglected children as a special victims prosecutor. And so we have to treat our victims of crimes with respect and dignity. They shouldn't hear about the Commonwealth Attorney's Office by a subpoena being stuck on their door. We should make a commitment to reach out immediately and make contact with them.
So your experience really speaks to that position right now.
Yes.
And I think also speaks to the time that we're in. And we have seen a record number of women step up and decide to run for office. Can you talk a little bit about that and how important you think it is for women right now to raise their hand and decide to run?
It is challenging, but it is important. When I first was approached about running for this office, the thought of taking on a 50-year incumbent man was very daunting, but the support from friends, family, and community has been wonderful.
That's
wonderful.
Great. And are you finding, as you're connecting with future constituents, that people are excited about the races that we have this year? I mean, we are lucky, right, to have, I guess lucky is the right word, to have elections every year here in Virginia. Do you find sometimes that it's hard to keep people excited? Are people still really engaged in Prince William County? Talk a little bit about what the energy is right now.
It is very exciting. People are really interested. When you go knock on the doors, a lot of times they already know there's an election. They know that they have to do some research on who they're going to vote for, but they're excited to do it. They're excited to hear about the different races and the details. So it's really been fun.
That's great. And when you said earlier about bringing compassion to this position, I think it's so important, especially when you're dealing with children. I know you've got an incredible background with that. Can you talk a little bit about the connection that you want to make when in office with children in your community?
I have 2 children. I have 2 teenage boys, and I enjoy always working with children. They tend to be very honest resources for us.
Yes.
And my passion in the criminal justice system with children is making sure that they are not only treated fairly, but that we are not tagging them as felons when they make mistakes as children. The same goes with mentally ill people, people who are suffering from addictions. The jail is not the place for them. And so I really want to focus on diverting them from the criminal justice system.
That's incredible. And you had mentioned earlier the school to prison pipeline would be one of your top priorities. Can you go into that a little bit more? I think that's such an important issue, and the fact that it's one of your top priorities, I think is incredibly admirable.
It is, and I often hear people complaining that that police are in the schools. Well, that can be a good thing too when it comes to security. They shouldn't be there though to be trying to get children in trouble. And I wouldn't say that that is their top priority. I think it's the safety of the community that is their priority. But people are really concerned about that. They're concerned that, my son or daughter goes to school and there's a police officer there. And so we want to make sure that they see that as a good thing and not as a bad thing. And I think from the prosecution side, if we treat juveniles who do find themselves in criminal trouble fairly, that perception will change. At least that's my hope.
That's great, and the fact that I think it's one of your top priorities is great. Now talk a little bit about, for viewers that want to get to know you better, talk a little bit about where they can go to find information about you and to find information about your race.
Well, as I said, I was a prosecutor for 11 years, so I kept my personal information very private. But you can now learn everything about me if you go to Facebook.
Sure.
And we have a website at www.voteashworth.com.
Fantastic. So our viewers will be able to learn more about you, more about the district and your top priorities that way as well. And is there an opportunity through your website, if folks would like to be involved and to help out, is there an opportunity for them to do that?
We are always looking for volunteers. We have a lot of doors to knock, and so you can volunteer to come knock doors. You can ask for a yard sign. Anything you can do to help would be very much accepted and appreciated.
And what date is the election going to be held on?
It's on June 11th, which is the last day of school for our public schools. It's at your regular polling location. They'll be open the entire day, like they always are.
Great.
And you can also vote absentee. That is available right now.
Great. So folks are able to go ahead and vote absentee right now?
Yes.
Or vote on election day?
That's right.
That's fantastic.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much, Amy, for being on the show this evening. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to get to know you better. And I would just urge the viewers tonight to please go to Amy's website and get to know her better, the district she's running in, because each race that we have here in Virginia is incredibly important. We're going to break, but stay with us. We'll be right back.
Nice going, Spencer! I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back. Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See ya, dude. See ya. Remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward.
I'm the awkward silence.
You try to avoid me, then there I am again. But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover. And this segment, we have joining us Ronnie Ross. Ronnie is a candidate for State Senate in District 27. Ronnie, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
It's my pleasure. You know, right now there's nowhere I'd rather be because if I'm not here, I'm probably doing lesson plans, and this sounds like a much better thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Ronnie, before we get started, tell our viewers what District 27 encompasses.
So District 27, I like to say, is the northwest corner of the state, or at least that's where it starts. So it's Winchester City, all of Frederick County, Clark County, goes into western Loudoun, and then it goes down into Fauquier, all of Fauquier, a little bit of Culpeper, a little bit of Stafford.
That's great. So you're in your car quite a bit.
I am, actually. So since I started running, 6 oil changes, and I've had 3 deer hit me. It's a pretty rural district as well.
That's incredible. That's great. Well, Ronnie, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for office.
So I actually moved out to Virginia about 10 years ago, and I come from the other side of the mountain. And I don't mean the Blue Ridge, I mean the Appalachian Mountains. I grew up near Wheeling, West Virginia, in a town called New Philadelphia, Ohio. And I knew wherever I was going to put down roots, where I was going to raise my family, there needed to be hills. Well, during the Great Recession, I moved out here, and I fell in love with the place. But whenever I moved out here, I never thought I'd be running for office. I'm a teacher. It's what I do. It's what I love, and there are few things better than seeing the look on a child's face when they finally get an answer or when they do something that they never thought they could do. And I thought that would be my life, and it was an incredible life. But then something changed, and my wife and I realized that we were going to have a baby. And it turns out having kids have a way of focusing yourself. And in that moment, I began to really worry about what the Commonwealth would look like. There was so much I loved about Virginia, but so much that we can do better. And from that worry, I started to think about running. And I'll never forget a moment. I was driving in the car with my wife, and we were listening to something. I don't know, probably NPR, WTOP, I don't know. And I was complaining. And my wife, Josie, looks over at me and says, "For the love of God, Ron, stop complaining and do something." And I looked back at her and I said, "Jose, what do you want? I vote, I volunteer." And she said, "You're running for office." I took a breath. I said, "Josie, we have a 2-month-old. She looked back at me and said, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm never going to forget this. She said, "When it gets hard, and it will be very hard, I will always have your back. And you can always just look at your son and know why you're doing this." And so I started running because there are so many children, so many grandchildren, so many of us. And that's where it all started.
That's incredible. And campaign trail does get hard. And so I know there has to be those moments when you often have to remind yourself why you're doing it. And the fact that you get to look into the face of your son and remember instantly why you're doing it, it's incredible.
Every night when I come home, I check in on him. Some nights we get to go play, right? We might play soccer. He can kick the ball now. But other nights he's asleep. But I still go check because it gives you the energy you need.
That's fantastic. Now, tell us a little bit more about your district. You had mentioned that it's rural. You obviously have to cover a lot of territory
this is true.
In this district. But tell me a little bit about what issues are most important to the people in your district.
You know, one of the great things about knocking doors is you get out in the community and you get to talk to folks. You know, it's almost like running a poll, right? You're at the doors, you're hearing. And I hear a lot about education. I hear a lot about our schools. You know, Virginia has one of the best economies in the United States. By some measures, we rank 12th, but our per pupil funding is in the high 30s.
Wow.
Right? We can do better than that. Since 2005, except in this last budget, our teachers had lost 10% of their salaries in inflation-adjusted numbers while paying more for health care. We can do better than that. You know, beyond that, I hear a lot about health care. We finally got Medicaid expanded, and thank God. Now the fight is for access. Also, opioids. You hear that a lot out in my area. What can we do to fight the addiction? I'm glad you had a candidate for Commonwealth's attorney on here because we can work arm in arm with them to help deal with this problem. I hear a lot about rural broadband. Many folks in my district don't have access to high-speed internet. How are you going to do telemedicine anymore? How are you going to go to school? So much is set up online. And of course, I live in a gorgeous area.
You do.
And so time and again, you hear about protecting our environment, conserving our land, our water, and you just hear that again and again and again on the doors.
Well, now let me ask this. If elected, will these also be your top priorities that you take to Richmond?
They will. You know, and it can be overwhelming at times because you think there's so much good we can do. But we have to stay laser focused. And for me, we have a dynamic economy in Virginia, but that means we have to continue to have a dynamic, educated populace. It helps everything. So we're staying laser focused on education. I think about my little 19-month-old boy and what kind of world he's going to inherit. We stay laser focused on the environment. So they are. You know, we could talk about other things too, about criminal justice reform, about campaign finance reform, but I'm out here talking about education, the environment, and healthcare.
Absolutely. And you've brought up so many important issues and what are important to the people in your district and what you will be a champion for in Richmond. And one of those things is broadband.
Yeah.
And I'd love to expand on that because you mentioned telehealth. It's also a great way to continue to grow and support small businesses in your area. Can you talk about, you know, the need for expanded broadband access and why that really is so important to every facet of the communities where you want to represent?
Well, it's so intersectional. I love how you touched on it. It is an economic issue. You know, I think a lot about the farmers, especially in Clark County, who drive into McDonald's in order to do work on the internet because they can't get broadband at their farm. I think about that kid in 9th grade trying to write his paper on Google Docs. Good luck with that.
Wow.
You mentioned telemedicine as a way to make medicine more affordable to people. Good luck with that if you don't have the connection. So whenever we help with broadband, it helps in all these issues. And eventually, I do think it's going to be a safety issue like telephone was back in the day.
That's interesting. I know one of the other big issues that we've touched on too is transportation.
Yes, of course.
Can you talk a little bit about transportation? Because it is such an important issue all over Virginia, but definitely in your district as well.
So what you see with transportation is a similar thing to broadband, where we have the General Assembly moving forward in the right direction, actually. So Governor Northam set up a study for broadband feasibility, and we finally got some funding for 81, which goes right through the western side of my district. So we're moving in the right directions, and we did that by getting 15 Democrats in the General Assembly. And so think about all the good we can do on these issues if we continue to move it. 81 is finally going to get the funding it needs. You know, there are other arteries through the district from 50 to 7 to 66 runs through just a little piece of it, to 17 to 29. We're getting this really dangerous hill taken care of, 29 at the Vint Hill intersection. That's because one of our delegates, Elizabeth Guzman, fought so hard to get the funding appropriated for it. So I think you're absolutely right to say transportation is a huge issue, and we're moving in the right direction.
That's great. And you know, this really speaks to why every single election is so important in Virginia, because so much of what we as Virginians work through every single day, those decisions are actually being made at the local and state level. And so talk a little bit about, if elected, how you're going to work with other elected officials and community leaders to push the important issues forward.
Luckily, one of the skills you have to develop as a teacher is listening and consensus building. It happens every day inside the classroom with my students, but it also happens with administration, with other faculty. And so part of governing is being present. So yes, you mentioned I'll be down in Richmond working, but I'll also be in my district, because that's who I'm supposed to represent. And I cover a ton of delegates. And we have to work together because we are sent to Richmond to do what's best for the people of the district. Not to do what's best for us, not to put party over people, but to do what's best for the people we're representing. And I think I bring those skills with me, yes, to Richmond, but also back to the district.
Absolutely. And what is one thing, if you could, 5-10 years from now, you would want your son to really take away from this experience? I mean, he really has been in so many ways what has inspired you to run and inspired you to work hard for your home and the place where you teach. If there's one or two lessons that you would love for him to take from this experience one day, what would those be?
So I'm going to answer your question in two ways.
Okay.
The first thing I want to say is this image that always comes to my mind, often when I'm falling asleep. And that's, I go to my son's school. There's another kid at this point. Don't tell my wife, please. Okay. We'll get there. I go to my son's school. I pick him up, and we go hiking. Maybe we trek through a river, and we just talk. And when we're talking, the kind of things we're talking about is what you said. And for me, I want him to take away the values that his dad ran on. This is a value-based campaign. I think a lot of your policies come from your values. Empathy, justice. I could go on and on. And so what do I want him to take from that? That his dad began the campaign with those values, and he ended them, and then he governed with them. And that's what I hope my son realizes, and that's what I hope to communicate.
That's incredible. Tell me, too, what makes you the most qualified for this position?
We've touched on a lot of these things, whether it's kind of some of the natural skills I bring to it, my willingness to be out in the district, talking to folks. But part of it, I think, is I grew up back in Ohio, all those years ago, and a lot of my family, they're all Republicans. I'm running as a Democrat. And so whenever I think about my district, I think about it as my family and those things I've had to navigate my whole life and build consensus. And so I think one of the things that makes me so qualified is that I'm someone who's present, who has experience listening to folks, building consensus with folks, and ultimately being accountable. Because I tell my voters, after they go to the office, after they go cast their ballot, then it's their turn to hold me accountable. And I'm someone who's willing to do that, put my feet to the fire, make sure I am representing you, and those are things I welcome and embrace, as any good elected should.
That's great. And you've talked a lot about what you want to do as far as your priorities for the district. And will you be a champion for your district, whether it be in Richmond, at the state level, or back in your community?
I can imagine nothing I would rather do. And if folks would like to find out more, www.ronnieross.com has all the information they might need.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie, for being with us. We're about to go to a short break, but stay tuned. We'll be back.
Your time is gonna come. Your time is gonna come. It's up to you to reach out to be that friend who comes along. Your day is gonna come.
When you make a friend, you make a difference.
Your day is gonna come.
Friendship. Pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Good one, son.
Last summer, my new dad took me on vacation. First, we went deep sea fishing.
Wow! I'm so proud of you, son.
And then we went on Thunder Shark. That was awesome! Let's go again. 3 times. I gotta say, it was pretty cool.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
What's it feel like when a woman's having a heart attack? Chest pain, like there's a ton of weight on your chest. Severe shortness of breath. Unexplained nausea. Cold sweats. There's an unusual tiredness and fatigue. There's unfamiliar dizziness or lightheadedness. Unusual pain in your back, neck, jaw, one or both arms, even your upper stomach are signs you're having a heart attack. Don't make excuses. Make the call to 911 immediately. Learn more at womenshealth.gov/heartattack.
Operation Wonder Park is a go!
There's nothing more powerful than imagination.
Honey, have you seen my cell phone?
But don't just imagine.
My park came to life?
Ooh, a plot twist.
Use STEM to build, create.
She did it.
And change the world.
Who's with me?
I'm more of a 2 feet on the ground kind of guy.
It's gonna hurt tomorrow.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover. And I am so honored to have this evening joining us State Delegate Wendy Gooditis, who represents the State District 10. Wendy, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. This is just a play date.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's so great to have you. And I know you were elected in 2017. And can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to run for office originally?
Well, there are a couple of tracks to that story. The one is that there were serious, I had a brother who was suffering from alcoholism and PTSD as a result of that. He had been abused as an 11-year-old boy by the leader of a children's activity, and it destroyed him. And the last couple of years of his life, I worked so hard to get care for him. And it prompted me to look into my local representation. I went to a town hall where the delegate was speaking. At the end of an hour of sort of vanilla issues, which is not what I was there for, I got the first question, and I asked about gerrymandering. What are you doing about it? So this delegate told us that he didn't like gerrymandering. It was a bad thing. He was working as hard as he could against it. But the fact is, when I looked at his voting record, it didn't look that way to me. And I didn't like that. So I started saying to the Democratic committees in the 3 counties, Loudoun, Clark, and Frederick counties, who's running against this guy? Because I'm going to work on that campaign.
Right.
And everyone said, no one's running, Wendy. And eventually, we were at a committee meeting. I was waving my arms around. My husband had his arm around me, and I'm saying, someone has to run. And someone across the room says, you run, Wendy. And my husband starts to tap me on the shoulder. And I was like, oh.
Here it is, right?
And here I am. And the sad ending to that story, the happy ending is here I am. The sad part of that story is that 2 weeks after I announced my candidacy, I found my brother dead. And I could have quit. I'd only been a candidate for 2 weeks, but I had met so many people like him who needed the help that they deserved and weren't getting. And I had met so many people who had dedicated their lives to care for people like him, the social workers, the doctors, the nurses, the people in the substance abuse programs. And they deserved more resources and more pay, and all of those things made me feel I couldn't quit. So I got elected. I ran on expansion of Medicaid, and in my first session, we indeed expanded Medicaid. And as of now, we are actually ahead. So this could provide health care insurance for up to, for 400,000 Virginians, and we're actually ahead of sign up. We have more than 270,000 Virginians who have signed up now for Medicaid, and that's ahead of what was predicted, so yay.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Because that vote was such a meaningful vote for so many people here in Virginia, and for you in particular, what did it feel like to cast that vote?
I cried, and my wonderful seatmates and my wonderful comrades behind me and in front of me, I was literally and figuratively embraced because I was crying. And I was saying, I did it for you, Brian. We did, this is for you.
That's incredible. That is incredible.
We did it.
Well, and you have now gone through 2 legislative sessions in Richmond. And tell me a little bit about some of your accomplishments. I mean, Medicaid expansion has to be at the top. It is so meaningful to so many people. But what other legislative accomplishments are you proud of?
Well, in my first session, and again, it might not be surprising given what had led up to this, but I had a bill passed about collecting statistics on suicide from all over Virginia and compiling them into one report, along with the different ways that different areas are trying to lessen suicides. So that here in Northern Virginia, we can look and say, oh, look, in Southside, they tried this and it seems to be working. And anyway, so that's an annual report and is available. So that was a good thing. That was last year. There were a couple of other things, but what's fresh in my memory is this year, I was able, again, along the lines of addiction and mental health, I was able to, I introduced a bill that takes fentanyl testing strips off the drug propaganda, what am I trying to say? Paraphernalia list. And that means that an addict or a police officer or an EMT or someone in an emergency room can hold a strip to a substance and see if there is fentanyl in it. And that can be life-saving. Wow. So that was one thing. Another thing was a study to see where we can put naloxone in public settings so that that life-saving medication is there if someone has an overdose. So you can tell that stuff really matters to me. Saving lives. Absolutely. It's saving lives. And then we had a school safety bill that there was a grant that was given to schools to hire staff for school safety. And I put in a bill that asked for those grants to be made available for bricks and mortar projects such as school vestibules, safe vestibules for schools. And a lot of the old, especially smaller elementary schools, don't have the money to do that. That's a big undertaking.
That is.
And that was asked for by my own county and superintendent. So I was in Clark County, yay Clark County.
That's fantastic.
I was very happy to go back and say, we did it.
That's great. I mean, you have really focused on issues, as you said it, that save people's lives. Right. I mean, one of the top issues, and one of the first ones that you mentioned, was suicide prevention. And it's often a topic that is hard to talk about. I've met with many veterans groups that is one of the top issues.
You've worked hard on it.
Among veterans. Can you talk a little bit about why this is so important? I mean, the fact that you're able to put together kind of best practices and statistics across the state, what can we learn from that?
Well, it's such a complicated issue, and there are so many reasons. All we can do is try different things. There might be hotline kinds of things. There might be programs in schools. Teen suicide is such a big issue. There are problems, of course, with behavioral health, and we have to, in my mind, raise the funding for behavioral health. And we need more beds, but we need more community programs to catch those people before they're at that crisis point. And gathering the statistics puts it in front of everybody, and it's a little bit hard to think about, but also in the report are the methods of suicide. And so perhaps if teenagers are getting hold of guns, then maybe we need to do something about that. So there's a lot we can do, but as you know, there certainly is not one simple answer.
That's right. That's right. And we actually have a caller, Cindy from Leesburg, who would be a constituent of yours, would like to know what your top priorities are going into this next year.
Well, I'll start with, it kind of carries on from my two major disappointments from this year. One is the failure of the ERA to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. Equal rights for women should be stated in the Constitution, and that failed to pass. It died on a party line vote.
And where exactly, because I know that was a big issue here in Virginia, can you talk a little bit about that process? And it died on a party line vote. Was it in committee? How did that pan out?
It's too complicated to say in a few minutes,
Sure.
but there were all of these parliamentary procedures that our wonderful delegate Jennifer Carroll Foy, who carried the bill, and our delegate Hala Ayala, there were a lot of manipulation and maneuverings to get the bill out of committee and to the floor for a vote. And we did get it to the floor for a vote, and it died. It's going to sound strange to people, but it was 50-50, and it died. So if we tie, the bill is dead. It doesn't pass.
I see.
And so one person on the other side of the aisle came over, but only one. And, you know, I think it's time, Virginia. I really think it's time.
Right, absolutely.
And then the other disappointment for me, I went into session with 4 or 5, depending on how you count, bills that would protect children from abuse and neglect. And those also were in honor of my brother. I have seen the damage that it does.
Right.
And those bills either died in subcommittee or were not heard at all.
Wow.
So, as discouraging as that is, it will not prevent me from coming right back with them next year, because if we can't protect our children, what are we doing?
Right.
So anything we can do for the children.
Absolutely. And I think your point on the ERA and protecting children, I think speaks to the larger point of how really important every single election is in Virginia. And I said earlier, we are blessed to have elections every single year here in Virginia. But these two issues in particular are ones that we absolutely should make a priority. And I think, you know, if you can speak a little bit to the importance of every single election here at every level and the importance of staying involved.
Well, so you might say that it might seem like a nuisance to have to vote every year, but I think it makes it really easy to remember. Virginians vote every first Tuesday of every November. It's simple.
Right.
And, you know, I think we have seen more voter enthusiasm in the last couple of rounds. I think that is going to continue. And that's a great thing. The more people who vote, the more we know where we are.
That's right.
So, you know, that's what we work for. That's what I work for.
That's fantastic. Well, I know we're going to have you on for the next segment as well. And as we move into the next segment, I would really like to talk more about your district, the areas in which you represent, the priorities of your constituents, and what this next year looks like. So as we prepare to go to the next break, please stay with us, because in return for the fourth segment, we're going to have Delegate Wendy Gooditis talking more about the district that she represents. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is the story of a boy who was very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. It made him feel uncomfortable. One day, he found out he had something called autism. His family got him help, and slowly, he learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
What do you think you're doing, Kevin?
Was just gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
Like hearing voices?
Like your text-to-emoji ratio?
Oh man, the selfies. Selfie, nailed it.
We all have warning signs that let us know that we're probably not okay to drive. Mine is pretending to be your subconscious.
Craig, come on man, let's split a ride home.
Being a dad is an adventure full of special moments.
A cruise?
Right.
Unexpected moments.
I got this.
And even awkward moments.
Okay, Dad, thank you.
But every moment you spend with your kids, even the smallest moments, can make the biggest impact on your child's life. So take a moment to be a dad today.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Lindsey Davis Stover, and we have with us tonight Delegate Wendy Gooditis, who represents the State District 10 seat. And Wendy, can you start out by telling us a little bit about what your district looks like? What counties and areas are encompassed in your district?
So you've heard the term gerrymandering.
Yes.
All right. Well, we have a prime example here. The district reaches from just east of Leesburg, and that eastern end of the district is very suburban and a lot of tech workers and a lot of commuters, right? And then it stretches across the southern half of Loudoun County, southern half of Clark County, extremely rural, horse country, both of those areas, and agricultural. And then it part of Frederick County as far as Interstate 81. A little bit of suburb there, not terribly dense. So from fairly eastern to very western. Yes. So I actually think about it as it's almost like two districts. Not when I vote. When I vote, I have to think about the district as a whole. But you know, there really are different conversations in the West than there are in the East, which is, for someone who loves, I'm interested in just about everything, so I'm well suited because I hear about just about everything. Right. But in the West, we talk a lot about agriculture and country life, and we talk about, you know, there are more income issues and more healthcare issues and things like that in the West. In the East, transportation. Sure. The commuters are always very concerned about that. Education, I hear about everywhere, more in the East, but certainly education is big across the whole district.
Now, what are those issues, and I'd love to explore both of those, in fact, on transportation, what is your top priority for your district in terms of transportation?
Well, it's really interesting. This year, so someone noticed in the 1980s and brought to the General Assembly that there were some issues with Interstate 81. So it only took, 35 years, right? In the 80s. So 35 years later, it has been brought up, it's my understanding, over and over and over in the General Assembly, but nobody wants to pay for it. It's 325 miles. But last year we did get a study going. The General Assembly required that a study be done. The study was done, it was done well. Great. And then we had a major struggle in session this time as to how to fund this. Taxes, tolls, a combination, nothing, throw it out the window, we don't care. All kinds of things came up. At the last minute, we did not pass a bill to fund Interstate 81 until at the last second, on April 3rd, during our veto session, the governor had amendments saying, please guys, I'd really like you to fund Interstate 81 improvements, and we were able to pass it. I'm so proud of that because I talked and talked and talked about that and pushed and pushed and pushed for that. We got it done. And the best news is that package also brought $20 million back to Northern Virginia for transportation issues here. Another some millions, lots of millions for Interstates 95 and 64. So really it benefits a lot of us, most of us here in Virginia. It was a good thing.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And in terms of education, you brought that up just a little bit ago. What are your top priorities when it comes to education? What do you want to go down to Richmond and fight for?
I have a master's in education myself. I taught for a dozen years. I actually homeschooled my kids because it was so much fun. I taught a bit in public school, I taught in private settings, I taught a number of different topics. I love that whole field. But I know how hard that work is. And I know that you need resources and support. And I know, I taught in public schools, and let me tell you, our teachers need emotional support. They need to have someone to help them with the kids who have issues themselves. That we need to fund these programs. We did pass legislation to say, yes, there has to be a higher ratio of counselors to children at all levels of K through 12.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that was a good thing. We have to fund these things better. Now, we passed a 5% teacher's pay raise. Sounds great, right? Here's the kicker. If the locality didn't step up to match the funds, the teachers got no raise. It was a matching thing. So on the eastern end of my district, I have happy teachers. On the western end, no. No.
Wow.
And that's frustrating. I think that the state should treat teachers as a class equally, and they should all get those raises, not just the ones in the districts who feel wealthy that year and feel like they can match. We have a lot more work to do. We have to pay our teachers what they deserve, and we have to fully fund our schools.
Absolutely. I didn't realize that on the matching. So you actually have communities in your district where some teachers were able to benefit from those raises this year and some weren't.
Right.
Wow.
It's very sad.
That is very sad.
They work equally hard.
That's incredible. Well, on terms of education, I mean, you have been such a champion for teachers and have had such a background
so much fun
in that area as well. I mean, do you find that is one of the top issues in your district, whether you're in the eastern part or the western part of your district?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is, and now it is even more in the western part of my district because the teachers. So I went to a Board of Supervisors meeting where teacher after teacher and parent after parent was saying, please, please. And it didn't happen. So yeah, there are many people in the western part of the district, who perceive this as one of our biggest issues.
Right, right. Well, and speaking about your district, I have loved spending time in your district. It has a special place in my heart.
Beautiful.
And I know that there are so many people in your district that know how hard you fight for them every single day, and they're so excited. Can you talk about the energy right now in your district and the means that people are going to get involved in every single level of government, but also in different community organizations as well? Can you talk about that energy right now?
It really is interesting. In the last couple of years, and I am one of those, it was only a couple of years ago that I went, maybe I should get involved with some of these things. And so many organizations have sprung up. And those organizations, of course, there's fluctuations. Some people lose enthusiasm. Some people join to 10 and realize they can only really do 2.
Sure.
That happens a lot. But the numbers of people engaged for the first time in their lives, really, a lot of us sleepwalked to the voting booth on November whatever. And I voted every year. Wasn't that all I was required to do?
Right.
But so many of us now have figured out, oh, guess what? Those votes, those people, whether it's at the state level, the federal level, the local level, the boards of supervisors, the town council, those votes affect me.
Right.
And it's only smart to keep tabs on not only who's in office and who you want to be in office, but what they're doing.
Right.
So in those 2 years, the energy, I think, is growing and growing and growing. Dare I say, a lot of it is women-driven.
Yes.
There certainly are many wonderful men involved, but the number of women who have suddenly gone, I think there's an imbalance there. Maybe we should try to redress that. It is fantastic. In our freshman class, in the House of Delegates, this is on both sides of the aisle now, we elected 19 freshmen 19 freshmen. Out of those, let me get this right, 12 are women.
That's great. So a record number of women were elected in 2017. And why do you think it's so important for women not only to raise their hand and say, I'm going to run for office, but why do you think it's important for women to just stay involved and engaged and interested in all of these issues?
As I said, it affects your lives, all of your lives. So, I mean, in the old days when men could vote, and then there was the thing that women would get the vote and men would tell them how to vote. And obviously this is not necessary. I mean, it's really lovely to be in a marriage where we're in harmony on who we vote for, but I know people who aren't.
Sure.
And that's okay.
Right.
You know, it's the only way, it's the only chance we have to try to push the world in the direction we think it should go. So it is a privilege. I wish everyone would vote. The voter registrations in the last couple of years, the efforts in Virginia to register new voters have been fantastic. I have a friend who goes and stands in a metro station like 4 nights a week, and every single time she registers 4, 5, 6 voters. It's like, go, she's a hero.
That's incredible.
She's a persister.
Yes, that's incredible. Well, on a personal note, I am deeply grateful to you because, as you know, I have 2 young daughters.
Adorable.
Who look up to you and just think the world of you. And you have helped to show them, 1, what's possible, and 2, why it's so important. So as a mother of 2 little girls, I can't thank you enough for stepping up.
I think their mama's doing a pretty darn good job of that herself.
It takes us all, right? And we all have to raise this next generation of girls.
And we support each other.
Absolutely.
We have to support each other. And not just women, but all of us. I mean, if we're not on this earth to support each other, to look after each other, to help raise someone who needs raising at that moment, and then maybe in 5 years that person's going to raise someone else. Why are we here?
Right.
If not for that.
And we can get that ERA passed.
Yeah, we can.
Yes, we absolutely can. That's great. Well, tell us a little bit, if people would like to get involved or learn more about you, where can they go to do that?
So my line is, I have a website. It is wendygooditis.com, and Gooditis is spelled good it is.
That's great.
So thank you to my husband for that cool last name.
Good it is. I like it.
Good it is.
That's great.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of ways. I once had, one of the impressive things about both being in the legislature and running any kind of, and being a candidate, the staffers that we have, that generation, so many of them are in their early 20s, and they work so hard for us, and they have told me there are any number of ways to volunteer. So go to websites of your favorite candidates, and you'll find a way. And you will be welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Wendy, for joining us this evening. It was an honor to have you on this show. Thank you for being with us tonight. Good evening.